Aquarium Director at the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium. Hope you guys are healthy, hope you are well. I just wanted to really briefly talk about artificial reefs. So behind me we have our shipwreck tank, and there is a buried sunken ship in here, as you can see. And actually, believe it or not, a lot of Florida's reefs are actually now artificial. What that means is we take things like ships, planes, and actually sometimes they sink unintentionally, and then they end up becoming an artificial reef, or sometimes we actually sink them intentionally. Because Florida reefs are in such big trouble, this kind of takes some of the pressure off of our real coral reefs here in Florida, and artificial reefs provide a lot of things for the tourism industry. Actually, over the years, we've made $1.6 billion in profits and created 26,000 jobs because it offers a lot of opportunities to go out and snorkel and scuba dive. And believe it or not, having things like a sunken ship, as you can see our lovely resident grouper hanging out in it, it provides a habitat where a lot of our reefs unfortunately have been dying at an exponential rate over the years. And this provides a marine habitat, and it actually attracts a lot of different animals, including invertebrates, large fish like our grouper, sharks, lobsters, and algae actually, and corals can form on these metal depending on the type of structure it is. So it does matter the material of the artificial reef, but oil rigs, ships, planes, these are great materials for coral and algae to grow, and it eventually actually literally becomes an ecosystem in itself, because we have sharks, we have invertebrates, we have all kinds of animals living in it, and then it's an opportunity to kind of take the pressure off of our real reefs. Believe it or not, it also helps if we put it in shallow waters, which we've done all up and down Palm Beach County here. We've actually sunken boulders and created these kind of marine sanctuaries right off the shoreline. And during hurricanes and storm surges, that actually, similar to mangroves, protects the shoreline from storm erosion. So that's another great benefit of it. And scuba divers, of course, this is just a sanctuary for us because we can go in and see all the animals we love right off the shoreline. So that's a free dive site for a lot of people. It also is a benefit to fishermen, although I'm not sure how I feel about that. But it does provide an access point for fishermen to collect snappers and groupers and fish that are very edible and people like to eat. So that's just a few things about our mangroves I wanted to talk about today. As you can see, our shipwreck is really a great replica of what you would find at a reef like this. You will literally have sharks, you'll have snapper, you'll have barracudas, you'll have lobsters, you'll have giant puffer fish, lots of eels. I mean, this is literally what you'll find, pork fish. So this is a great representation of an artificial reef. So I hope you guys learned a thing or two about artificial reefs today, and this is Becca signing out. Hey guys, it's Rebecca Fago again, the Aquarium Director at the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium. Hope you guys are all doing well today. I wanted to take a moment today to just briefly talk about invertebrates. Invertebrates make up a big chunk of animals on this planet, and basically all invertebrates mean is that they lack a true backbone, so they don't have a vertebral column. We have several invertebrates here I wanted to talk about. So the first one I'm going to talk about is pretty popular here at the Science Center, and that is the chocolate chip sea star. Chocolate chip sea stars actually get that name because it kind of looks like a chocolate chip cookie, and us scientists aren't always the most creative people on Earth, so hence the name chocolate chip sea star. We call it a sea star, not a starfish, because does that look like a fish to you? I didn't think so. These guys belong to a family called echinoderms, and most of the animals I'll be talking about today are echinoderms. So echinoderms basically lack a true brain. They do have a brain stem, which is like a conglomeration of nerve cells that send signals to their body, but they actually aren't really capable of thinking or feeling any pain, which is kind of good news for the sea star, because do you know how he defends himself? Well, he will actually take his own arm off if a predator attacks him in the wild, and he'll slowly walk away with hundreds of tube feet, and the predator will actually eat his arm usually, and that will usually work for him. And as long as he doesn't get a fungal or bacterial infection, he will grow his arms back repeatedly throughout his lifetime. This guy has hundreds of tube feet in between each arm, so all those little red dots or pink dots you see are actually tube feet. So unlike a fish, he does not swim, he walks, and he has little suction cups on those feet similar to an octopus or a squid. And that's how he can stick to the sides of the tank, like in Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. They also have little tiny dots for eyes. They're called eye spots or light sensors. there's one at the end of each arm. So they have 5 eyes, so 3 more eyes than humans have, but they cannot see the way humans do. They actually can only see light and dark shadows. And a lot of echinoderms actually can't see at all. Another really interesting thing about sea stars is they'll actually spit their stomach outside of their body to eat. They have 2 stomachs instead of 1. And it kind of looks like a balloon filling up with air, and they're almost always eating. So if you've ever been scuba diving or snorkeling in the ocean and you turn one of these guys upside down, you will see their stomach hanging out. Basically, the acid in their stomach will disintegrate whatever animal they're eating, and then their second stomach brings it into their body cavity and continues to digest it with stomach acid. So that's one weird way of eating, and it's a pretty interesting animal. There's literally thousands of types of sea stars in the ocean, so this is just one of many, many types. Believe it or not, there's actually a sea star called basket sea stars that have over 150 arms. Most people think it's some type of coral, but it is actually a sea star. So there's some that have 14 arms, there's some that have 9. Sometimes a sea star will lose an arm and 2 will grow back in place of 1. So it's a pretty interesting and weird animal. So that's one invertebrate, a good example of an invertebrate. Another one I wanted to talk to you about that belongs to the invertebrate family and another echinoderm are the pincushion sea urchins. So pincushion sea urchins come in many, many different colors. They come in purple, pink, gray, black and white, and mixes of those colors. What's fascinating to me about them is all their little prickly spines that, as you can see, are starting to move. That's because urchins actually have to feel their way around in the world rather than seeing. They have no eyes at all. And pincushion sea urchins are very common, and they can be found in warm oceans all over the world. These guys are harmless to touch, but I should warn kids and adults alike. I tell them all at my touch tank programs, you do not want to touch these animals unless you're an expert. There are venomous urchins in every ocean in the world, and frankly, it's best not to touch anything in the ocean. It's better to just observe and not touch. Not only are there a lot of animals that can hurt you in the ocean, just the oil in your fingers can hurt a lot of animals. So you can observe these guys. They're beautiful animals. And believe it or not, this is actually something humans do eat at sushi restaurants. It is called uni. On the bottom of their body, unlike the sea star, they do have a mouth and teeth. They have 5 triangular teeth that fit together in a tiny circle. They use those sharp triangular teeth to like scrape red and green algae off the rocks. But say a little snail is crawling by slowly enough, he can latch onto it because he has hundreds of tube feet just like the sea star, and he can bring it to his mouth and crush it with his razor sharp triangular teeth. It's what I imagine an alien's mouth would look like had I seen one, but I haven't. So that is the pincushion sea urchin. The only way they can protect themselves is they actually take little leaves or shells. I've even seen human trash stuck to them, and they stick it to their heads. So that actually keeps them basically hidden from predators. An octopus, for example, will eat 30 of these a day, and that's just a snack for an octopus. So they somehow know they have lots of predators. So most people just swim right past these guys because they're almost always covered in shells or leaves. So that is the pincushion sea urchins. Another invertebrate I can talk about today is the pencil urchin. Pencil urchins actually don't have all the color variations that the pincushion sea urchins do. They kind of all have the same brown color pattern. And if you look closely, it kind of does look like little nubby pencil spines. Really cool, interesting fact about these guys is they got the name pencil urchin for a reason. The ancient Egyptians over 5,000 years ago used to collect these out of the Red Sea, break the spines off, and make chalk imprints on stone tablets. That was long before we figured out the papyrus weeds that grew along the Nile River could be woven into paper, and the Egyptians eventually figured out the ink sac of squid could be used as pen ink, and there's a little mantle that you can find inside of a squid's body that they used as literally like a feather pen. But before all that, it started with the pencil urchin, so that's how we kept the name. Again, as you can see, because they are blind, they are starting to slowly move their spines around. And these guys are also harmless to touch. They don't have to cover themselves up with leaves or shells like the pincushion urchins do, because these guys actually have pretty thick spines. So their main form of defense is to take these thick spines and really dig themselves onto a rock on the reefs. So say I wanted to eat this guy, I might be able to physically pull some of those urchin spines off, but I might not be able to physically get him off of that rock because he'll be so embedded in there. And another cool thing that these urchins are capable of, just like the sea star, is they can grow back body parts. It's called regeneration, guys. So if they lose spines, they can grow them back, which is pretty cool, just like the sea star can grow back arms. Another invertebrate I want to briefly mention is I have a really cool animal right here. It's called a fighting conch. Conchs actually belong to the mollusk family. And do you see this pretty brown color on the inside of his shell? Well, what I find fascinating as a marine biologist is this guy made his shell himself. So from the moment he was born, he secretes a substance we call in science calcium carbonate, forming layer upon layer of the shell. And it gets even cooler than that. If you look closely at him, you can see that he has dark brown skin. Well, that's why the shell is dark brown. He's actually been secreting his own skin color into the shell and then buffing it and smoothing it with his snail-like skin his entire life. So, for example, probably one of the most popular shells to collect off the beach is the queen conch shell. It's actually the largest of all the conchs. See how it's pale pink on the inside? Why do you think that is? You're correct. Queen conchs have pale pink skin. So that's why it'll always be pale pink on the inside of the shell. So fighting conchs actually got their name for a specific reason. This right here is called his operculum. I basically call it his foot. That's how he scoots along in the bottom of the ocean, but I also like to call it his trap door, because if a predator attacks him, he can actually close himself into the shell like this and protect himself from potential predators. So that's a fancy word called operculum. He also made that himself. And that is very hard to see, but right here on the front half, you can see his very alien looking eyeballs. And this guy is called a fighting conch because sometimes he'll take that operculum and he'll actually slap you with it. So he's not doing that right now, but that is typically what they'll do as a form of defense. They'll literally slap you with their operculum. So that's the fighting conch in a nutshell. So now you know, if you didn't know before, how all of these shells exist in the ocean. So that's across the board. The snails, the oysters, the clams, the conchs, they made their shell themselves. So that's pretty interesting, guys. And just to show you a few other examples of an echinoderm, I have my Bahamas sea star. This guy is the largest in the Atlantic. They are bright orange when they're alive. I no longer keep them in captivity because in the last 10 to 15 years, unfortunately, humans have been collecting these out of the ocean and keeping them as souvenirs, and now they're officially on our Endangered Species Act. So I do not keep them in captivity, but they're really cool animals. I do see them around here at Peanut Island. Like I said, they're very large and they're pretty cool animals. So right here, all these gaping holes is where their hundreds of tube feet would have been located. And the hole in the middle is where I was talking about earlier, is where their two stomachs would have been located. So you can kind of see the example of that. And just to point out another basically invertebrate in my tank, we have a crustacean right here. It is called a cleaner shrimp. Cleaner shrimp also lack a true invertebrate, or they are a true invertebrate. They belong to the crustacean family, like lobsters, crabs, shrimp. And these guys do have a kind of a harder exoskeleton, and that kind of keeps them protected, but it's not like having bones in their body. Another good example are jellyfish, corals. Those are animals that lack a true vertebrae. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my little spiel today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Be safe, be well.